Namaste and welcome to our continuing series, The Synthesis of Yoga with Ranganath. And we are on page number 26, The Conditions of the Synthesis, second paragraph, but it is often difficult.
The conditions of the synthesis is the main section, but the chapter is the threefold life. Okay? The threefold life. So before we start reading, just a quick recapitulation so that we know the context. Okay? Sridhar is saying that in the universe, nature has up to this point evolved three stages. First of all, there is the creation of matter, then there is the creation of life, and then there is the creation of mind. And mind, he says, is still being perfected. It is not yet perfect. So man has a choice of three lives, three types of life. The first is the material life. Okay? If you live an ordinary life, you have no higher aspirations, and the characteristics of material life are self-preservation, multiplication and reproduction. Okay? So this is the characteristic of the material life. Then it comes to the mental life, and that's what section we are in, and he's discussing that. The mental life is not interested in status quo, it is not interested in self-preservation, but its characteristics are change, progress, wants to go higher and higher, idealism. This is what mind wants. But when they see in the physical world with their idealism and their ethical and moral ideas, they find that the physical world is full of imperfections. There is falsehood, there is perversion, there is all sorts of things which the mind of man rejects as very, very inferior stuff and which is not worthy of man. So there is a tendency in the mental life to withdraw from the physical world. Okay? But Sridhar says that withdrawing from the physical world may be okay for some time, but when the mental life actually participates in the physical life, then it gets enriched. And he has given literature and art, they get enlightened. We gave an example last time of art before in Europe was only portraits. Okay? Or even if you go to religious paintings, Botticelli and others, goddesses and gods and all, pretty static. But when you come to the Impressionists in France, 1800 something, okay, 1850, 1860, they were not interested only in still life. They were not painting still life. Vases and flowers on a table, static. But they started painting scenes, painting meetings, paintings in the park, paintings in parties. So this is it brought life into the art. So up to this point he has come. Then he goes to the spiritual life, which we'll discuss later on. And spiritual life is again static because it doesn't need to change. So in matter, in the lowest material life, there is an attempt at being static, at being preserve the status quo. We don't want to be disturbed by any disturbance in we want to preserve the comfort zone. Because it is based on tamas, okay? Then you come to the mental life, it wants progress, it wants change, it wants perfection. Then you come to the spiritual life, you go to a plane of consciousness where there is again a static condition. Static because it is perfect, it doesn't need to change. So that is the stability. So this is the three things. He has not yet discussed the spiritual life, but he is in the mental life and he is discussing various aspects of the mental life. So we are up to that point. And he has told you that mental life has a tendency to withdraw because of the imperfections and the perversions and the falsehood and the ignorance of the physical world. The tendency to withdraw. Now we come to the next paragraph he says. Okay, we'll read that. But if it is often difficult for the mental life to accommodate itself to the dully resistant material activity, how much more difficult must it seem for the spiritual existence to live on in a world that appears full not of the truth but of every lie and illusion, not of love and beauty, but of an encompassing discord and ugliness, not of the law of truth, but of victorious selfishness and sin. Therefore, the spiritual life tends easily in the saint and the sannyasin to withdraw from the material existence and reject it, either wholly and physically or in the spirit. It sees this world as a kingdom of evil or of ignorance, and the eternal and divine either in a far off heaven or beyond, where there is no world and no life. It separates itself inwardly, if not also physically, from the world's impurities. It asserts the spiritual reality in a spotless isolation. This withdrawal renders an invaluable service to the material life itself by forcing it to regard and even to bow down to something that is a direct negation of its own petty ideals, sordid cares, and egoistic self-content. So he has started speaking about the spiritual life now. And he's saying that if mental life itself finds the physical world to be full of falsehood and ignorance, how much more it must be for the spiritual life to be able to adjust itself to these imperfections. Okay? So we'll give examples also as we go along. I'm reading each sentence and see whether it's clear. Srivno's use of language is very, very precise, and he adds a huge amount of information to every sentence because of the way he uses words. But if it is often difficult for the mental life, note the word often, because it is not always so. In fact, he is himself recommending that the mental life should participate in life. Okay? Then it gets enriched, he says. So, if it is often difficult for the mental life to accommodate itself to the dully resistant material activity, the inactivity, dead matter, dully resistant material activity. Resistant to what? Resistance to any impulse, resistance to consciousness, resistance to sensitivity. There is none of these things in matter. How much more difficult must it seem for the spiritual existence to live on in a world that appears full, not of the truth, but of every lie and illusion, not of love and beauty, but of an encompassing discord and ugliness, not of the law of truth, but of victorious selfishness and sin. So, truth, love, beauty, all these things don't seem to exist in the physical world. But again, he has used a word which you have to pay full attention to. Difficult must it seem for the spiritual existence. He is using the word seem, he is not saying it is. Because he wants even the divine life in the physical world. So you see the importance of the word he is using. Okay? He is using the word seem.
But I feel here like Sri Aurobindo is, being very humble in expressing his views, because the truth is that as you turn towards the spiritual, your view of the material reality automatically bridges the two, right?
No, not necessarily. When you make your mind silent, you are rejecting the physical world. There is no bridge.
No? Okay.
No.
But you're rejecting the material world as it is.
Yes, because you see the illusion and falsehood and not true. The bridge comes only at the supramental level, at the third level. In fact, in all the planes of spiritual planes of consciousness, higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind, and overmind, even in the overmind there is a problem. There is a distinction between spirit and matter. That gets bridged only at the supramental level. Okay? Therefore, the spiritual life tends easily in the saint and the sannyasin. So they are using two words. So, saint and sannyasin. Why they are not using one word? Because the saint has bhakti for the divine. Usually it is a devotion. Okay? He may not have any knowledge. And the sannyasin has rejected the physical world and he gets knowledge. But he may not have love and power. Okay? That's why he is using both the words, the saint and the sinner. There are two ways to approach the divine normally, through knowledge and through love and devotion. That's why he is mentioning both. The saint goes through love and devotion to God. And the sannyasin goes normally through knowledge. But it doesn't mean to say that they are exclusive. The sannyasin can also get love later on, and the bhakti, the bhakta can also get knowledge of the divine later on. In fact, that's the basis on which Srinivasa says they are going to combine everything. Okay? Therefore, the spiritual life tends easily in the saint and the sannyasin to withdraw from the material existence and reject it either wholly and physically or in the spirit. So, what does he mean by that? So, either wholly and physically, okay, you are rejecting the physical world, but you continue to be in the spiritual planes of consciousness. That's one. But in the spirit also, when he's saying, it means to say that you even give up the spiritual life and you disappear into the infinite. He's making a distinction between the two. Okay? The Buddhist idea is to completely dissolve yourself and go back into the origin of things. Not even live in the spiritual planes of consciousness. It is possible by giving up the body to remain in the subtle physical or the spiritual planes of consciousness. That is how Sri Krishna was, after 5,000 years or whatever, he is helping Sri Aurobindo, okay, in a subtle body. Vivekananda is coming and giving him advice in a subtle body. Okay? Ramakrishna is seeing Buddha because they have not disappeared into the infinite. They are living in the spiritual planes of consciousness as spiritual individuals without a body. Okay? That's what he means by these two phrases. Okay? To withdraw from material life wholly and physically, okay, or in the spirit. So it sees this world. What is the it? Spiritual life. It sees this world as a kingdom of evil or of ignorance, and the eternal and divine either in a far off heaven or beyond where there is no world and no life. They go back into the non-manifestation. Okay? As we discussed just now, there are two choices, many choices are there for a soul which has escaped from the prison of body, mind, life and gone into liberated itself into the spiritual planes of consciousness. Many choices it has. It can merge itself into this non-existence, it can merge into the divine, it can remain with an individual soul and live constantly in the spiritual planes of consciousness, or it can even take rebirth, come down to the physical world and help the others. So all these possibilities are there. Srimanta wants the last one. He wants you to make your consciousness perfect, but don't disappear. Because if you disappear, how are the others going to be helped? So what you have gained, give to the others. So come down and help the others. That is Srimanta's idea. So I go to the next sentence. It separates itself inwardly, if not also physically. Because many in India, they used to go over to the cave, the Himalayas, the forest, separate itself even physically. And even if you don't do that, sometimes they used to withdraw to the attic. Like Vivekananda used to do in his house, he used to go to the attic, withdraw from the normal activity of the family. Go there and remain in. So Srimanta is saying, it separates itself inwardly. You can be in the physical world, but withdrawn inwardly. If not also physically, from the world's impurities, it asserts a spiritual reality in a spotless isolation. This isolation can be physical or it can be psychological. So, Srimanata does not want a physical isolation. He wants a psychological isolation. Isolate yourself from the imperfections of the physical world. Learn to not be affected by anything in the physical world. And the phrase in the Gita is the most beautiful phrase explaining that the lotus leaf in water. It is in water, but never gets wet.
How does one arrive at that? How does one arrive at that?
By yoga.
By yoga.
By yoga and by samatha. That's what exactly we are reading now. There are so many paths to it. There is Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. All of them lead to a perfection.
Right. But sometimes, like when we see our imperfections and impurities and we see themselves expressing themselves, and at that point, even though it is not the right way, but since we are human and we are in ignorance, they come out and they get expressed. So at that point, inwardly, we must detach ourselves.
You stop identifying yourself with this movement. Shirda has a very interesting phrase. He says, consider them as coming from outside and you are responding to it. Don't think that you are producing the imperfection, you are producing hate, you are producing jealousy, you are producing selfishness. No, it is coming from outside and you have the power to reject it. He says it's much more easy if you think it's coming from outside, and that's a fact actually. Yes. It comes from outside and you are responding to it. Okay? He says that is a better way to.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so it assures the spirit in a spotless isolation. This withdrawal renders an invaluable service to the material life itself by forcing it to regard and even to bow down to something that is a direct negation of its own petty ideals, sordid care, and egoistic self-content. He says that although I don't agree that you should withdraw from the world, it does have a great effect on society when normal people with their desires and their attachments, they see that someone is capable of distancing himself from these type of things, then they admire. That's why in India, whatever the quality of the sannyasin, we always pay respect to them. Okay? We respect, whether they're worthy or not is another matter, but we have respect for sannyasins in India. Okay? The holy men are respected.
But now we see like an opposite trend in India where the holy men are like really questioned, and sort of it's taken in another extreme form of like hate.
So, okay. So basically what he's saying in this parallel, the mental life rejects the physical world because of the disgust that it feels for the imperfection and the falsehood and the lies and all this. The spiritual life, it is 10 times more possible to feel rejected. In a way, he is saying it is justified. I can understand why the ascetic wants to withdraw from life. But his own idea is, however difficult the task, we don't need to reject the physical world. We take it up as a challenge. Okay? I go to the next paragraph. But the work in the world of so supreme a power as spiritual force cannot thus be limited. The spiritual life also can return upon the material and use it as a means of its own greater fullness. Refusing to be blinded by the dualities and the appearances, it can seek in all appearances whatsoever the vision of the same Lord. Okay? The same eternal truth, beauty, love, delight. So, it is true that the physical forms are all only appearances, nama rupa. Okay? So, we'll explain that. What is an appearance? Why is the physical world an appearance? The Vedantic formula of the self in all things in the self, and all things as becomings of the self, is a key to this richer and all-embracing yoga. So, he is saying that however difficult it is for the spiritual life, there is a sort of logic here. The divine has created the world. There are theories that say that the divine has not created the world. We'll discuss that a little later. But in the Advaita philosophy and in the Hinduism, true Hinduism, all they agree that Advaita, it is the divine that has created the world. Although it seems to be full of imperfection and falsehood and limitation and perversions, it is really the divine who has created all this. So you have to justify. We have written 1000 pages to explain this, how it is justified. But this is it's a distortion of that. So if the divine has made something, is it possible that he has made something permanently imperfect and completely false? It cannot be. So therefore, we also must see why the divine has created all this, and in the appearances also, if you try hard enough, behind the form, which is transitory, It is there today, it will disappear tomorrow. But behind that form, which is only Nama and Rupa, you are seeing there is a reality which is permanent and true. So that's what basically he is saying. The ascetic is seeing only the form and rejecting it. Okay? But it is possible to see behind the form. That form, all forms in the physical world are transient. They are there now, they disappear in time. Some may disappear quickly, some may disappear longer, but everything will ultimately disappear. Even the solar system is going to disappear one day, after a million years. Okay? And there are small things which disappear very, very quickly. Okay? There are butterflies which last only for 1 week. There are things that last even for shorter time. Okay? So this is what he's saying. But behind the forms. Now, what do we mean by the appearance? They are like images on the cinema screen. Are they real or are they unreal? They represent something that is real. So all the forms in the physical world are appearances. They are symbolic images of something which is true. But themselves they are not true. They exist today, they disappear tomorrow. Okay? So this is the appearance of things. Nama Rupa is in our Indian philosophy.
Like, there is an example that I'm remembering, like the color of the leaf. You see, the green color is being reflected out. Like, that's what I read someplace. So the leaf is anything but green. It's absorbing all the other light, and what it's rejecting is what we see. So that's a good example of how.
So these are only forms which, behind the form, there is a reality, a permanent reality. That's what he's saying. We need that, we'll see. Okay? The spiritual life can also return upon the material and use it as a means of its own greater fullness. Its own greater fullness. The spiritual life is perfect. Refusing to be blinded by the dualities. The dualities are all the opposites that exist in the physical world. Hot, cold, okay, dark, light, okay, then gentleness and harshness, cruelty and compassion, all these things are the opposites and they exist in the physical world and they all have the right to exist in the physical world. That is why you see the imperfection in the physical world. Why are there imperfections in the physical world? Again, one small quick look at it, because when the divine is creating something, he doesn't create only a limited range. He, being himself infinite, also creates infinitely. So if you are creating infinitely, you are not, suppose you are creating light. Are you going to create light only of one power, 500 watts? No. You create 100 watts, you create 50 watts, you create 0 watts, you create also 5,000 watts, 10,000 watts. So the whole range is created. Why? Because those are the possibilities of the infinite. So when you see this end and that end, they seem to be different, but essentially they are the same. That's what you have to understand. The dualities are not opposites, they are complementary aspects of the same vibration. Okay? We can have a lot of discussion on that, but this should be enough. The dualities are not contraries. But when you are in the normal consciousness of the mind with ignorance, you do see that they are opposites. But when you go to the spiritual level of consciousness, you see that they are not opposites but complementary aspects. That is the reason why morality disappears in the spiritual life. It's not valid anymore. There is no good and bad, there is no sin and virtue. They are all complementary aspects of each other. You have to get rid of sin, but you have to also get rid of virtue, which is a limitation in the spiritual life. Okay? So, refusing to be blinded by the dualities, the appearances, it can seek in all appearances whatsoever the vision of the same Lord behind everything, even in a stone, even in a caterpillar, even in a dog, cat, you can see the divine. Much more easy to see in human beings if you are capable of it. But in everything you can see the divine. And what are the values of the divine? Truth, beauty, love, delight. The Vedantic formula of the self in all things all things in the self and all things as becoming of the self is the key to this richer and all-embracing yoga. Richer and all-embracing yoga is talking of the integral yoga. In the other traditional yogas, they select only one thing and normally reject the physical world, except karma yoga. Okay? But Jnana yoga and Bhakti yoga, there is a tendency to reject the physical world. Too imperfect, we don't want to have anything to do with it. So, but the integral yoga is not rejecting the physical world, and even in the physical world, you are seeing behind the appearances of things, behind the transitory forms, you are seeing the permanent truth. And if you see the divine presence everywhere, you will naturally experience truth, beauty, love, delight. Okay? And the Vedantic formula, they say, usually it is there, the one in the self, the one in the many in the one, and the one becoming the many. This is the Vedantic truth, which Srimado adopts. The one is the divine. The divine in everything in the physical world. He is there in the stone, he is there in the tree, he is there in the minutest of unicellular creatures, he is there in everything, he is there in man. The divine is there in everything. But when the divine is creating, everything is in him. Because the philosophy is Advaita, there is nothing else except the divine. So how can he produce something outside himself? He can't. It has to produce within himself. And man can experience that condition also, and that is called the cosmic consciousness. You feel the whole universe within yourself. Okay? So, the divine becoming, the divine in the many, the multiplicity of the world is there in everything. Everything is there in the world, the many in the divine. And the divine becoming all these things. He himself is a stone. He is not living in the stone. He is living in the stone, but he himself also is a stone, the same material. So this is what the Vedantic formula is saying. Okay? The Vedantic formula is the Advaita. Okay? The self in all things. He is using the word self. You can use the word Brahman. You can use the word Atman. And the others call it Nirvana. It is a consciousness which is featureless, immutable, infinite, eternal. Okay? And permanent. That's why there is no change in the spiritual life. It's something permanent, perfect. Okay? So Srimad is saying the others, many branches of spiritual life, they are rejecting the physical world. We, the integral yoga, will not do that. However difficult it be, we will not. We will try to see the divine even in the physical world. Okay? We go to the next para. They are all small paras, a little unusual for Srimad. He uses very big paras and very big sentences. The next one also is fairly small, we'll go to that. But the spiritual life, like the mental, may thus make use of this outward existence for the benefit of the individual with a perfect indifference to any collective uplifting of the merely symbolic world which it uses. I'll read the whole paragraph and we'll come back to it. Since the eternal is forever, the same in all things, and all things the same to the eternal, since the exact mode of action and the result are of no importance compared with the working out in oneself of the one great realization, this spiritual indifference accepts no matter what environment, no matter what action, dispassionately prepared to retire as soon as its own supreme end is realized. It is so that many have understood the idea of the Gita, or else the inner love and bliss may pour itself out on the world in good deeds, in service, in compassion, the inner truth in the giving of knowledge, without therefore attempting the transformation of a world which must by its inalienable nature remain a battlefield of the dualities, of sin and virtue, of truth and error, of joy and suffering. Slowly Srimad is coming to explain, he is going to explain his own view of things. Okay? So, he is saying that the spiritual life very often withdraws. Okay? But he is saying He is saying like the mental, that's very interesting because the mental life does not reject the physical world. The mental life takes up the physical world and improves it. What about medicine? Okay? Medicine is an activity of the mind because you are trying to remove diseases, you are trying to remove everything, you are trying to give more education. These are all mental ideas. So the mind does not take the body as it is but tries to improve. It improves banishes the illnesses, makes a better health. Okay? So this is what mental life is doing. It does not reject the bodily life. It takes it up. He's saying the same thing also with the spiritual. It sometimes takes up instead of rejecting the physical world, it takes it up. But it is not for the collectivity, it's for the individual, he says. This is the problem which Sranda is trying to tackle. In India, until now, in the spiritual life, mostly the stress was on individual liberation. When a yogi is when he is doing yoga, he is trying to liberate himself. He is hardly bothered about the others. The Srila is very much bothered about the others because his idea is evolution. Not only must the individual benefit, but everybody must benefit. There must be an evolution which takes the whole level to another level. We see that there is imperfection in the physical world is not permanent. We see from matter, life. And life is a huge improvement on matter. So how can you say it is permanently imperfect? And in life also there are imperfections, but that is again being tackled by the mind. So there is a very clear evolution upwards. Why should we stop at mind? We should go even further. And man can participate in this effort. That's what he said. And he should participate. So this is not like the ascetic disappear into the infinite and leave the world as it is, but get the divine consciousness, come down and help the others, and further make the evolution quicker by participating in God's work in the physical world. That's what he's saying. Okay, he's going to say. But the spiritual life, like the mental, may thus make use of this outward existence. It's not rejecting the physical world. Outward existence in the physical world. Make use of this outward existence for the benefit of the individual with a perfect indifference to any collective uplifting of the merely symbolic world which he sees. Why should I waste my time on the collectivity? It's an illusion. It is something which is non-existent. It's only an appearance. I don't care for it. This is the attitude of the individual yoga in India up to now. Okay? The idea of evolution has been there, but not as clearly enunciated as in Sri Aurobindo philosophy. Okay? So, he's saying, since the eternal, there is an argument that the individual is giving, the individual yogi. Since the eternal is forever, the same in all things, and all things the same in the eternal, since the exact mode of action and the result are of no importance compared with the working out in oneself of the one great realization. What is the one great realization? Realizing the divine. Okay? That's the most important thing. Why bother about anything else? That's what he said. This spiritual indifference accepts no matter what environment, no matter what action, dispassionately, prepared to retire as soon as its own supreme end is realized. So, I want liberation and that's enough for me. This is physical world is imperfection. Don't want to waste any time here. That's what he said. It is so that many have understood the idea of the Gita. This word so is very interesting. So Srila uses it in this sense always. Okay? It is not, it is so that. I did this so that that is possible, not in that sense. So means like this. Srila uses the word so in this manner. Okay? And you have to stress it. It is so that many have understood the idea of the Gita. The Gita is also, they have understood in that way, but that's not correct. That's it. Or else, the inner love and bliss. Okay, so is it always that the spiritual man is rejecting the physical world? Not necessarily. Okay, he's saying, or else the inner love and bliss may pour itself out in the world in good deeds, in service, in compassion, the inner truth in the giving of knowledge, without therefore attempting the transformation of the world, which must by its inalienable nature, remain a battlefield of the dualities of sin and virtue, truth and error, of joy and sorrow. Even when the spiritual men don't reject the physical world and help the others, there is no idea of evolution. They are human beings, they are miserable, animals are miserable, we'll help them to whatever extent is possible. There are so many societies, prevention of cruelty to animals. Okay. Even they're busy with animals. See that they are not unhappy, make them happy. Same thing with human beings also. There are so many homes. They may not be spiritually inclined, but even spiritually. Look at Mother Teresa. What's she doing? She is picking up all the destitutes from the streets of Calcutta, old people, rejected people, and giving them food, shelter. Okay. But there is no idea of transformation. There is no yoga in that movement. They are only giving relief to somebody without attempting the evolution. That's what Shabda is saying. So he is telling you all the different grades. There are spiritual people who disappear from the physical world and don't care for the world. There are some spiritual people or even non-spiritual people who help the world. There are others who attempt to actually transform the world. And who is that? Shabda and Mother. That's a gradation he is giving. Okay? Or else the inner love and bliss may pour itself out in the world in good deeds, in service, in compassion. The inner truth in the giving of knowledge, without therefore attempting the transformation of a world, which must by its inalienable nature remain a battlefield for the duality. Sin and virtue, truth and error, joy and suffering. The physical world is bound to be imperfect and full of suffering. Try your best to relieve it as far as possible. This is there not only in the spiritual field, but also in the secular field. That's the interesting part which is discussed elsewhere. In the secular field, you have humanitarianism. Humanitarianism, altruism, philanthropy comes often from religion, but it can come from not religion also. I'll give you 2-3 examples. Okay? One is in America there was something long ago, 25, 30, 40 years ago, Peace Corps. They used to send out people for improving the quality of life in others. Okay? In France, even today, there is something called Médecins Sans Frontières. Médecins Sans Frontières?
Doctors Beyond Borders.
Yeah. International work they will do. Yeah. Wherever there is an epidemic, wherever there is a flood, we will go and try and help. There is nothing to do with spiritual life. Okay? So that's what is pointing out. It can be so many different things. There is one thing you have to understand, that the transformation of the world is not an absolutely new idea. Okay? It did exist in the earlier days. It was there in many traditions. In the Vedic period, it was definitely there because there was the Superman they had understood. And even the evolution idea was there. The Dashavata, very clearly you can see that it's going from very low lives to higher life, finally you get to the Kalki, who is the divine manifestation on earth, the avatar. But it was not spelled out in detail. That is one thing. Srinath is now spelling it out in detail. Note interestingly that the idea of evolution spiritually is different from the idea of evolution in science. In science, it's only the mutation of cells. Biological forms are becoming more and more complex. Okay? But in Srinath's, the spiritual evolution, it's a consciousness that is becoming more and more perfect. Yes, it does require a parallel biological evolution also, but it is not essential. It's not the essential thing. Okay?
The biological evolution is a result.
Pardon?
Biological evolution is the result of the other.
It is a result, and also it is necessary if you don't want to reject the physical world. Okay? The brain of man is far superior to that of an animal. So the biological evolution permitting a higher consciousness to occupy the physical form, you need a biological evolution. Okay. So that's what, and the great importance of Sri Aurobindo work is not, as I said, the evolution itself, but actually bringing down the higher principle down here. That's what they did. So they participated most actively. It's not just an abstract idea. They made it an absolute reality. That is the importance of Sri Aurobindo. And it is something so far advanced that it escapes most of the human comprehension. That's why it is not so well known. But the day will come when all these facts of pulling down the supermind and all these, they are recorded in the universal memory and they will always be available. So those who rise to another level of consciousness in future will be able to see who is responsible for all this. But Sri Aurobindo mother at least worried about their name and fame. Why? There is no ego. You are doing the work only for the divine.